Alright, so this is episode 2 of Jeopardy. This time we're moving on from easy mode into medium mode. And that means that we're going to have to enter answers by keyboard. So no more are they going to show us any hints or any possible answers. No, not Optimus Prime is going to have to win this one based on what he knows and not what he can just guess, you know, from 33% chance. So let's look at the categories that we're going to be looking at here. Mobilize, that means things are going to start with an M.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Guys know how much I loved ships last time in Jeopardy. Presidential alma maters might be a good category. And then generically science. So I went to the Poe category first, because again, I like going for the category I know the least in, to go ahead and get rid of that. And Edgar Allan Poe, famously dressed in black. Now you can see that as I enter the letters, the game does give you a word bank of things that are close to that, to what you're entering. That can speed up your time instead of having to type in every answer each time. So here the hint tells you that Poe's wife had the same name as his alma mater, which was the University of Virginia. And so, you know, her name is indeed Virginia. And here I went ahead and typed it out. You know, from here on out, I'm pretty sure that I spend most of the time just getting enough letters to activate the word bank.
The first obituary of Poe, which spoke of the frailties of genius.
Poe lived primarily in Maryland. That's why the Baltimore Ravens are a thing. So the paper that did his obituary would have been the Baltimore Sun. And it looked like I went ahead and tapped out Baltimore anyway.
Player 1, you pick again, please.
All right, we continue down the Poe category. And I had no clue what this was.
A human-like raven.
But it turned out to be a very famous British writer, but not necessarily a poet. This was a more of a storyteller.
The correct response is Charles Dickens. Player 1.
So yeah, I didn't realize that Edgar Allan Poe paid attention to Charles Dickens, but evidently he did. I'm also going to screw up this question because
Player 1.
I think of something in a bottle. I think of either a message in a bottle or a ship in a bottle. And I really don't think ship in the bottle made that much sense.
Sorry, that's wrong.
And as a result, you know, I basically undone a lot of the work I did in the rest of that category.
Okay, player 2.
Yeah, I didn't think it was Bible in the bottle either. I never would have thought of that phrase.
Let's hear it, player 3.
No, it turns out to be a manuscript in a bottle.
A lot of clues, a lot of categories.
I'm not sure I shouldn't have gotten credit for message. So here we are with all clues having something to do with M.
Okay, player 1.
So here our mechanical device is going to be a metronome. And yeah, at this point I think I start actually using the word bank feature so I don't have to type everything out. We're going to keep going down through this category. Now when I saw this I was thinking, oh, well, it must be a mushroom, but I wasn't terribly confident in it. And as you can see, somebody else got the credit and she got control of the board. But she stayed in the same category.
A powerful person in entertainment, or a member of a Muslim dynasty that once ruled.
Now this one was interesting because there's some different spellings for how to describe the Mongol dynasty in India, and the word that's come down is Mogul. But if you read about it in a history book, most likely you'll see the Mughal dynasty or the Mughal Empire in India. I thought this was funny because I've run into people like this. These are people who are serially monogamous.
You got it. We return to you, player one. This large tube-shaped pasta is often stuffed.
And whenever you start talking about tube-shaped pasta, the only thing I really know of is macaroni. And, you know, I really wasn't very confident about that, so I stayed off. Player 3 didn't and got it wrong. So with macaroni wrong, I had no idea what it might be.
Here's the correct response.
And it ended up being manicotti.
Player one, back to you for our
next
select.
Yeah, might want to stay away from the Italian food.
And can be vicious if provoked.
But if we go into fish,
let's hear it,
there's
player one.
only one thing that I know of that it's the moray in front of it, and that is a moray eel. And yeah, you don't want to mess with those. Those things are pretty nasty.
You get to pick again, player the ability of the members of the family EXOCOETIDAE.
And this was the question that I screwed up, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I got too cute trying to fill in the. So you see the little thing came up, and then I thought I'd selected flying fish there, but I hadn't actually selected it yet, and so it gave me fly. Fortunately, the game was nice enough that none of the other two players got the right answer either.
Player one, let's get Kelly's assistance on this clue.
On this man's first voyage, Brothers
And
Martin
here's a
Pinzone commanded the Nina
odd way to get to Christopher Columbus. And also an interesting thing about the way Jeopardy organizes names in the word bank. You can get there from either the first name or the last name. So you see here I'm going with Columbus, but they give me Columbus Christopher, and that is, you know, it's essentially saying Columbus, comma, Christopher. And they get the first thing.
PTEROPHYLLUM are known by this.
So because I didn't get the flying fish thing,
okay, player one.
I made a guess on this one that these were angelfish. And I was more careful about selecting the answers and putting the things in.
Built in 1816, the first private yacht to cross the Atlantic.
I thought this was interesting because I
the barge of this queen.
Really had no idea. The clue is the fact that they referenced a barge.
Okay,
and Grimlock is attacking my feet again.
And you're back into some money.
And so that would have, you know, Cleopatra's Barge being a rather famous boat.
Magazine editor Miranda Priestley, who
now we're into roles from movies. Now some movies, you know, I'm familiar with. I've never seen The Devil Wears Prada, but I know, you know, I know it has Meryl Streep and Anne Hathaway in it.
Player one, make a selection.
And that Meryl Streep is the title role.
An American Gigolo.
This one, I had never heard of.
Here's what we wanted. Richard Gere.
And it was kind of interesting to me because, you know, Richard Gere is famous for another movie involving prostitutes, where he doesn't play the prostitute. 2005, of course, is Walk the Line, and this is when Joaquin Phoenix played Johnny Cash. And what's amazing to me is that that movie is now 11 years old. It just doesn't seem like it should be. Now, this question I thought was interesting based on the answer because the correct actor, who is Robert Downey Jr., of all people, is, of course, nowadays Iron Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And this one, I had no idea.
Here's the correct response. Laurence Olivier.
And although Laurence Olivier is a very famous actor,
Back to you for our
you
next
know,
selection.
I couldn't have
US
told you. Now this
Military
was
Academy
right in my
Class of
ballpark here.
1915.
Presidential alma maters. So here's
Yes, Player
Eisenhower, who was at the military academy and graduated in the class of 15.
That's correct. Player 1, start us. U.S. Naval Academy.
Naval Academy class of 46 is President Jimmy Carter, who served
Okay,
on
Player 1.
nuclear submarines soon after that.
You are correct. Player 1, back to you for our next selection. Georgetown, class of 1968.
Georgetown class of 1968,
Let's hear
fairly
it, Player
recent.
1.
That is Bill Clinton. Yeah. Yep, there he is.
That is correct.
Clinton Bill, as we refer
You
to
get
him
pick again, Player 1.
in the speech bubbles.
Answer. It's
Now, here was an interesting development because, in theory, this would be a category I would be comfortable with, but because my lead,
okay. Here
you know,
is
I
the clue.
decided only go for $1,000, and it's a good reason. It's a good thing that I did. Harvard class of 1904. That was, you know, I could not fit my head around, and what it turned out is that I wanted a president who was older than this guy ended up being when he became president. And unfortunately, the answer to this question is Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You know, I didn't know it, and I wasn't going to come up with it. I really did not. You can see I almost typed in Nixon there. I really had no clue. Yeah, so I went for the good old not guess anything.
Franklin Roosevelt.
So I lost $1,000.
You get to pick again, Player 1.
Well, let's see if I get it back here.
Class of
Oh, this is a famous one.
1952.
Eureka College is the alma mater of Ronald Reagan. You know, often cited in his material, you know, just a sort of a simple sort from Eureka College.
Back to you. The third law of thermodynamics implies
So now we move on to
that can never
science.
be brought to this temperature.
And of course, the third law of thermodynamics says that entropy always increases, so you can never bring a system to a place where movement just completely stops. And that place where movement completely stops is called absolute zero.
Good for you.
0 Kelvin,
Select again.
I think
In
minus
2006,
273
Israeli
degrees
scientists
Celsius.
claim to have created the ball type of this stormy phenomenon. Using
I didn't really have any
a
idea what the Israelis had discovered here,
Let's hear
particularly
it.
since they were using a microwave,
That's it.
but it turned out to be lightning.
Okay, let's get back into this. Player 3, you make the next selection as we. Here's Kelly from our Clue Crew with.
All right, now this was pretty good
Symbolized lambda,
because
total
the
distance
lambda
covered
symbol
by
was
one
enough to
complete
tell me
cycle of
that we're
oscillation.
looking for wavelength.
Peak to peak, or trough to trough, is called this.
So,
Yes, Player 1.
you know, that was an easy one for me to jump on. And it's kind of funny because you start putting it into the keyboard, and there's really not a lot of options. It's right there.
That is correct. Okay, let's get back into this. Player 1. We went
So now we're going to
underground
finish
to
out
learn this
science.
unit is equal to about 6.022
The hint here is that you had to go underground.
molecules of a substance.
6.022 times 10 to the 23rd is Avogadro's number, which is how many of anything are in a mole of something. I was kind of concerned about how to spell mole. It's abbreviated MOL, but I went ahead and spelled it MOLE, which is the full word,
That's correct.
and it still gave it to me.
And
So
now
yeah,
here's
it
the
is
dollar clue.
spelled the same as the little thing that digs
In
around under the earth.
2007, Intel announced a new, faster chip design replacing.
And this one I should have gotten.
With hafnium.
the 14th element on the periodic
Let's hear it,
table.
Player 3.
So sitting a row down from carbon
Player 2, you're going
is
first in the
silicon.
Jeopardy round when we return.
But, oh well, didn't get it. Still got a comfortable lead headed into the next round. And here we go. Now, this question had to do with a Civil War-torn country in the 1930s, and that is generally a reference to Spain. I know there are other civil wars that went on besides the Spanish Civil War, but it sort of is famous for, you know, what happened later. In fact, it was sort of a proving ground for World War II.
Has control of the board. Some consider the Hannibal.
So I immediately move over to Leaf Me, which is the weakest category for me personally.
Okay, player 1.
Although the first question was about something that was famous from Cuba, and you know, the only thing I know there are the cigars. And so there we go. We've got those. I'm going to continue to go down this category again because it's the one that I'm least comfortable with. And I'm going to get this wrong here. I initially thought maybe it was spinach, but then I remembered that there were also problems with lettuce. However, didn't, you know.
That's not it.
You get the wrong outbreak
Any other take?
because there have been E. coli outbreaks at various times. And, you know, I guessed wrong. It turned out to
Here's the
be
response we were looking for. Spinach.
spinach.
Please pick again, player 1.
I can keep going down this category.
Leaves have an exterior epidermis.
Now, this one made me think of the word vein, but, you know, I was having a hard time, for some reason, bringing myself to take that word.
Veins.
And it's too bad that I didn't, because it was indeed the final answer. And that led me down to the Daily Double. Now, again, this is a category I'm not a big fan of,
How much are you going to wager?
so I'm going to go for 1,600. So if at worst, I'll end up at 5,000.
The Macrocystis genus of this seaweed can grow fronds
And
up to
it's a big
200 feet long.
seaweed bed, which made me think of kelp. And so, and
That puts
it
you
does
in
indeed
front
turn
of
out to be kelp.
Player 1. choose
So I'm in
again.
good shape here.
This fragrant leaf of the laurel tree is
And then we asked about the laurel tree. And unfortunately, if you'd asked me, you know, about its association with Greek myth or something of that nature, I might have been able to do that. But no, I did not know that bay leaves came off of laurel trees.
As the Depression hit Europe, this figure in Belgium went from 5.
Whenever you see a figure in the 20s in the Great Depression era, they're probably referring to unemployment, even though this is not the United States here, but Belgium. And that's what I jumped on here.
Player 1, you start us off. Melvin Purvis gained fame, more than Hoover liked, as head of the FBI.
This one, I took a guess that since the Chicago office of the FBI was very busy with Al Capone during the 30s, I figured that this is where, that was the city that was most likely to be the answer here.
That is correct. You get to pick again, player 1.
Then I decided to back away from the 1930s because, you know, it wasn't, I was doing pretty well there. And so here we go for sitcom, something I shouldn't know a lot about. But this one, sort of set in a town that's supposed to be set in my home state. This is the Andy Griffith Show. It's a shame we lost Andy Griffith in the last couple of years.
You get to pick again. The never used
But
lyrics
Opie's
of
still
this
around. That
theme
would be
song
Ron
were
Howard.
written by Gene Roddenberry.
I thought this was funny because I never even knew that
Yes, player
Star
one.
Trek had a lyrics to its song. But it makes sense that Roddenberry would have written them. So,
Yes.
many people who were involved in Star Trek later on thought that Roddenberry was too involved in the franchise.
But this disembodied hand.
This is another thing I didn't know but was able to piece together.
Yes, player
Of course,
one.
the disembodied hand of the Addams Family is Thing. So, if you see Lurch, and you look at Lurch's hands, they are evidently the exact
Player
same
one. Pick again.
as
On August
Thing.
29th, 1967, he finally.
This is also something I didn't realize as a TV show. I'm much more familiar with the movie,
Let's hear it.
dating to the early 90s with Harrison Ford in the title role, and that would be The Fugitive. So, it must have been interesting as a TV series,
Yes.
since obviously
We
you
return to
can't
player
catch
one.
up with them
In
every week.
1964, Mary Tyler Moore won her first Emmy as this.
Now, I was familiar with Mary Tyler Moore, and I knew that she was on the Dick Van Dyke Show,
Player two.
but I did not remember the characters and the names the characters had from the Dick Van Dyke Show. So, my assumption is that this is this character, but yeah, I couldn't place
Here's
it.
the correct response. Laura Petrie. Player one. Choose again. In summer 18.
So I decided to go to this category called the Brownings. Evidently, the Brownings are a very specific couple of people.
It's player three. Right.
And this was my worst category by far.
Two of Robert's poems, Fra Lippo Lippi and Andrea del Sarto.
I mean, the first one, if you'd known the location, you could have gotten Florence, perhaps. This one, it's Renaissance men. And what do Renaissance men do in Italy besides anything else? Well, they paint.
Painter.
But I wasn't going to risk it.
Guess now.
So more Browning stuff.
Death, I said. But there the silver answer rang. Not death, but this.
And
It's player.
that line I did not recognize,
That is correct.
but evidently player 2 did, so she almost got out of the negatives there.
Has control. In 2009.
African countries. Now this is going to be one of my stronger categories.
President.
So Jacob Zuma is the president of South Africa.
Yes, player one.
And it's in there somewhere. Yep, there it is.
Yes. Where do we begin, player one?
So I went back to the Brownings and I had to deal with the Daily Double.
The second
I thought,
Daily
oh
Double.
geez,
You are currently in the lead. So
I
what's
don't really want to deal with this. So I went for 600 as my wager, which would
all right,
be
here's your
just bring me back down to
winner.
14,000.
This practice in her 1840
Um,
poem, The Cry of the Children.
1843 should have been a hint for what this was, but I actually thought it had something to do with punishing children, so I tried to look for the word spanking. You'll see that spanking isn't even in the word bank of the Jeopardy game. So I thought maybe it was whipping the children, and that also didn't get us anywhere. But there's something very obvious, if you know anything about the history of the early industrial period, that I should have attached onto instead, but didn't. Now Grimlock is attacking my avatar down at the bottom.
So you are still in the lead. Here's what we were looking for.
And that thing would be child labor. Okay, the poem is talking about the evils of child labor.
Elizabeth returned to London a semi-invalid and spent the next 5 years confined to her room.
And finally we get out of the Brownings category. And I was not sad to see it go either.
Player three. Good.
Evidently, I've been activating my idol a lot, because you'll notice that Grimlock has been attacking my avatar quite a bit here.
The FLN has dominated the political scene in this country since it won.
This one made me feel bad, because I should have remembered who the FLN were, and I definitely should have remembered the date of independence. 1962 is not a common one, and it's not Niger, which is which the computer player went for. No, this is Algeria, and I really felt like I should have known that one. But I guess I would say I made up with it here, except that this question was rather obvious considering they gave you half the answer in the question. Equatorial Guinea is a country that has a little bit of land on the African continent, but also is the island of Bioko. And that's it.
It's the car battery terminal with a plus sign.
Now, it's all good. All the answers had to do with positivity or good things. And I kind of missed that for the first question, so... And then he went back to the Depression. The very famous pact signed by Germany was with the Soviet Union. I don't know if they would have accepted Russia as a correct answer. They didn't risk it either. Of course, that brought on World War II.
Or not yet settled like an unpaid debt.
I didn't really know where to go with this, and when I saw the answer, I was only slightly disappointed. It's like, yeah, I get it, but I don't know how I could have gotten to it. This is a fun one because, for some reason, the Great Blue Heron likes to pop up in a bunch of Jeopardy questions, or maybe just herons in general. But, you know, there's the Great Blue Heron as the answer here.
As a noun, it's a lavish production.
This one I didn't know where to go with either.
We're talking about spectacular.
And it ended up being a spectacular, which makes sense, but that word was not really coming to me.
Tom Seaver was nicknamed Tom.
This is kind of funny. Tom Seaver, of course, is a pitcher for the New York Mets back in the 60s and 70s. And he was known as Tom Terrific. And so I was able to get that one.
In 1932, he said Huey Long and Douglas MacArthur were the two most dangerous men.
This one, I've heard this quote before, and I went for the guy I thought was most obvious to have said it. But in 1932, this man was not president.
Nope. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what this person was thinking. Considering that, you know, in 1932, we're 18 or more years away from Douglas MacArthur doing the truly controversial move of his career.
Yep.
You know, in 1932, about the only thing that MacArthur had done questionably was the bonus army dispersal. Yeah, this one I know, and this one you know too. The answer, of course, the capital of Djibouti is Djibouti. The problem is, couldn't, you know, didn't want me to spell it that way. I really thought I was going to miss this question because I wasn't going to be able to get the letters arranged in a way that it would recognize in time. But, you know, we pulled it out.
Now let's take a look at that $2,000 clue.
And then finally, 2000 in African countries.
Is the president of this landlocked African republic
BECHUANALAND is currently the nation of Botswana. sitting just on top of South Africa, home of the Kalahari Desert.
That's correct. Oh, sorry. Player 2, you'll not be promoted.
And thus home to lots and lots of meerkats.
Here's today's final Jeopardy!
Grimlock is going after us again. You can...
Children's lit.
Children's lit?
So, what's your wager?
I don't know how I feel about that. I don't need to wager a lot of money.
This is a good category. Here's
So it
the
looks like
clue.
I wagered
This
$600.
little book begins, these two very old people are the father and mother of
And the clue here is it's a Roald Dahl book. Now, they gave you 4 answer choices for the Final Jeopardy question. And only one of these is a Roald Dahl book, and that is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
With that correct response,
In fact, they're going to do this for Final Jeopardy for the hard mode too.
your response.
So,
With that correct response, you will gain.
you know, in that sense, that didn't change from easy mode to this.
To you.
So we were victorious here in medium mode with hauling in $26,000. And next it'll be time for hard mode. We'll see if there's any real difference and the competition gets tougher. See you then.